When you were campaigning in '07 against Julie Anderson for the Tacoma City Council, about a fourth of the billboards in Tacoma had big blue signs on them that said "Constitutions Matter." This was attributed to your campaign. Is that factually correct?
No,
Not at all.
I had no money to come up with any billboard advertising.
So you're not aware of them at all?
I'm aware of them.
Okay.
I saw them, and the explanation I saw was that there was the proposed city council moratorium, and I don't know if that passed or not, and would have caused the corporation that owns the monopoly of most of your billboards to go to federal court and challenge that. And so I don't know the current status of that, but they, on their own volition, came up with that slogan,
Okay.
which is great.
And you had no issue with them putting your image on them?
I didn't notice my image
Okay.
on any particular billboard that I saw.
Okay.
So that's
There's some that are floating around. I'll send you one if you're
sounds
interested.
great.
Yeah. So last time, well, before we get into this, I would like to talk a little bit about your gun perspective. And one of the things that we talked about last time in our last interview was your interest in firearm training for students, for high school students. We talked a little about the incident at Virginia Tech, and that you thought if, and don't let me put words in your mouth if I'm incorrect here, but you were suggesting that individuals, had they had the proper gun training, they would have been able to prevent a disaster like Virginia Tech. So my question to you about that is, isn't there another step that needs to be taken before gun training? Isn't there a internal issue that needs to be discussed first? Isn't there a cultural problem? Aren't we looking at symptoms when we're talking about gun violence and violence like that? Isn't culture what needs to be fixed first? What brews that sort of emotional response that we saw at Virginia Tech?
I'm not running for school counselor. I'm running for sheriff, a law enforcement position, and I have to deal with protecting the public now and implementing programs and projects that can help people now. So addressing the whys of individuals being sick and doing what they do is beyond my scope.
Okay.
I mean, I have to work with the human services departments of the county and the city, and the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department simultaneously. I believe, as a principle, individuals should be educated, and that starts with the government primary and secondary schools for the most part. You have almost zero education of any kind, and you can break down the education into two parts. You have the book paper learning. This is a revolver, this is a pistol, this is a gun. Going through a book, going through a notepad, learning about firearms. Subsequent to that, you go to an indoor range, you go to an outdoor range to have actual physical use training, familiarity with a particular weapon. So, at the very least, the state of Washington owes its high school students an opportunity to learn more about firearms, to reduce ignorance, to reduce fear as a primary step. I also believe most students should go through the physical training. Now, for individuals that haven't gotten that training and go to a private institution like University of Puget Sound, Pacific Lutheran University, or any of the government university and community colleges, well, that's a little stickier situation because they're empowered to have, by their board of directors or trustees, individualized policies. Now, I've contacted a handful of the security departments, such as here at University of Puget Sound, also Pierce College out in Puyallup, and they know who I am. And there's the problem of disparate policies. UPS says if you're not a student, if you're not a faculty, if you're not a staff, you're a visitor, there's no reason for you to be on our campus with a firearm, and we'll escort you off. Although I think it's also the case that if you're a student or staff or faculty, you still can't have a firearm. Well, why can't good, law-abiding people possess, whether openly or not, a firearm for their protection? Well, they're making the choice to not be able to do that when they come to this particular university or that institution. And that's a longer uphill battle in empowering individuals to take personal responsibility for their life. I mean, it's your responsibility ultimately to defend your life with whatever means you think is necessary. And I want to empower people by establishing firearm safety training classes if elected Pierce County Sheriff.
So what?
As Pierce County Sheriff, will you consider advocating that firearm safety become a component of the WASL?
I have mixed feelings on the WASL, so it's something I wouldn't oppose, but I don't know how much political capital I'm willing to spend to make that happen, because to me it's independent. I mean, each high school, even if it's empowered by the legislature you have to have both the funding and the philosophical desire of individual school districts to go forward with that.
Why do you think they don't have that desire? What is keeping them from seeing it your way?
I would say it's funding.
Funding.
It would be funding, and in your urban districts, the general disposition of the people that inhabit that community to be unfamiliar with guns and to not see the need for guns. Well, we've got the police force that protects us, and it's a certain ethic. It's a country ethic, being used to handling firearms to defend yourselves against animals, and a different ethic for urban dwellers.
What is your perspective on the war on drugs? And as sheriff, what would you do to fight drugs in Pierce County?
I reject the war on drugs terminology. I consider it a war on drug users. You've got drug users that get permission from a doctor to get a prescription for a particular controlled substance. And you have categories and groups of controlled substances that people who want to medicate or recreate with are denied access to. And the war on drug users, like the war on drugs, imitates almost exactly prohibition from the 20s. The harmful results of the law is what needs to be addressed. And what I would do is be concerned about the individuals that are in custody that don't need to be in custody. Because the premise being, are you sick and you're taking drugs to heal yourself? Well, then you don't belong in a jail. You belong in a hospital or some medical facility that needs to be established. And working with the Human Services Department to prioritize who needs to be here and who doesn't is one of the goals.
Before I go on to my last question, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your running for sheriff? Any other platforms?
Not that I'm willing to release at this time or prepared to release. I would say that being a ranked choice voting position is a historical event. It's one of a handful of races in the country that will operate on that principle, and it's an implementation of a voting system and election system I have followed for a number of years, and I was able to participate in a small way with the charter campaign 2 years ago. But I just hope that enough voters feel compelled to participate and to learn how to do the first choice, second choice, third choice voting. I expect to get a large number of second choice votes, because people that are I don't want to turn off the people that like the incumbent or this other challenger. And when you understand the mechanics of the balloting, it's something that leads me to be optimistic about my chances for being elected this year.
Win or lose, you're making history.
Win or lose, the public gains by my running.
Okay, and I do agree with that. And my last question, and if you don't want to talk about this, feel free. It may not be relevant to your running for sheriff. It isn't necessarily. But last time we talked a little bit about some of your artistic projects, and you said that the more detail would be for another interview. I'm curious if you are interested in talking a little bit about some of that artistic perspective and philosophy, and just what some of those projects are and why you do them.
Jesse Hill is running for sheriff.
Jesse Hill. Mm-hmm.
And that is how I'm portraying myself this year for this race to the people of Pierce County. What Robert Hill does is a little different, a little distinct. And you have to talk to him for his artistic expressions.
Okay.
I take this very seriously, running as Jesse Hill for this race this year. It's a complete change from last year's race. Last year's race was for a legislative body. This race is for an executive branch race. And so I make that distinction.
So does Jesse Hill remember Robert Hill's campaign, Constitution Matters billboards?
I only saw some of the billboards,
You didn't see Robert
and I didn't
Hill.
see any Mr. Hill on any of the billboards.
Thanks for the clarification.
All right. Well, thank you very much,
Okay.
Jesse Hill, for meeting with us, and good luck in your upcoming election.
Thank you very much.